Someone you're close to asks how you've been, and they mean it. They're not making small talk. They've put their phone face down and they're waiting. And something in you goes very quiet and very fast, and you hear yourself say, "Good, busy," in a tone that closes the door politely behind it. And then you change the subject, and they let you, and the evening moves on, and later, alone in the car, you feel a flicker of something you can't name. Not sadness exactly, more like the sense of having stood outside a room you were invited into. Or you're in a relationship that's going well, genuinely well, and the other person says something warm and simple, and instead of warmth you feel a small pressure behind your ribs, and a very reasonable thought arrives. I need some space this weekend. If either of those landed, this one is for you. Because what looks like independence from the outside sometimes has a very different story underneath. There's a name for it. In attachment research, it's called dismissive avoidant attachment, and it's the piece people misread most often, including the people who have it. Let's do the history properly, because it matters. In the 1960s, a psychologist named Mary Ainsworth designed a study that has been repeated thousands of times since. It was simple: a parent and a small child in a room with toys. The parent leaves for a few minutes. The parent comes back. What Ainsworth watched was not the leaving, it was the reunion. Most children protested at the door, then went to the parent when they returned, calmed down, and got back to playing. But there was a group who did something else. They barely looked up when the parent left. They barely looked up when the parent came back. They kept playing, calmly, alone. On the surface, these looked like the easy children, the independent ones. Then researchers measured their heart rates and their cortisol. They were as distressed as everyone else, sometimes more. The calm on the outside was not calm on the inside. It was a strategy, and it worked, in the way a good strategy works. It kept the child from reaching for something that had not reliably arrived. That's the whole thing, really. Dismissive avoidance is not the absence of need, it's need with the reaching turned off. And this held up when researchers went looking in adults. In the 1980s, Mary Main, one of Ainsworth's students, built something called the Adult Attachment Interview. It's an hour of questions about your childhood, and here's the clever part. It isn't scored on what happened to you, it's scored on how you talk about it. People can describe a genuinely difficult childhood and be rated secure, because the story hangs together and the feeling matches the words. And people can describe a lovely childhood and be rated dismissing, because when asked for a specific example, nothing arrives. So how does a child arrive there? Usually not through anything dramatic, usually through repetition of something quiet. A parent who was reliable with lunches and homework and the school run, and unreliable with feelings. A house where crying got you sent to your room to calm down, and coming back composed got you welcomed. Where you're fine arrived faster than a question. Where the fastest way to be loved was to need very little. Children are good scientists. Given that data, they draw the obvious conclusion: closeness has a cost, and self-sufficiency is safe. And then they get praised for it. That's the part that locks it in. Mature for your age. So easy. Never any trouble. Now watch how that same solution shows up in an adult life, because it's rarely obvious. You are excellent in a crisis. When something goes wrong, you get calm and useful while other people fall apart, and everyone notices, and it's genuinely a strength. What's less visible is that you're also calm 2 days later, when it would make sense not to be. You're the friend everyone calls. You are not the friend who calls. And if someone points that out, you don't argue. You just notice you don't have a good answer. You give practical help easily. You drive across town at midnight, help someone move, sort out their paperwork. Being asked to sit with someone while they cry is harder, and you might notice you start looking for the fixable part. You need more alone time after connection than before it. A good weekend with people can leave you needing a day to recover, and you might have quietly labeled this introversion. Introversion is about energy. This is about proximity. You handle conflict by getting more reasonable, not less. Your voice gets flatter and more logical, while the other person gets more upset, and they end up saying, "Why don't you care about this?" And you genuinely don't understand the question, because you're right there, being careful. You are very good at being alone, and you know it, and you've built a life that proves it. But notice something specific. When you picture a bad week ahead, the plan you make is always a plan you can carry out by yourself. Other people appear in your life as things you enjoy, not as things you rely on. And if someone offered to carry part of it, your first instinct wouldn't be relief. it would be a quick calculation of what that would cost. You feel the pull to leave when things get good, not when they get bad, when they get good. After a great trip, or the first time someone says something serious about the future, you notice a small internal step backwards, and your mind produces excellent, specific reasons for it. And there's a memory pattern that's easy to miss. Ask about your childhood and you might say, "It was fine," and find you can't produce much detail. Attachment researchers actually score for this. Not the content, the texture. Fine, normal, standard. A whole decade with the resolution turned down. Here's the part I want to be careful with, because this gets said badly online all the time. None of this means you don't love people. It doesn't mean you're cold, or broken, or that you're doing something to someone on purpose. It means that early on, a version of you concluded that reaching out was the risky move, and built a life that runs beautifully without it. That's not a character flaw. That's a 9-year-old's engineering, still holding up decades later. But there is a cost, and it's worth naming clearly, because it's the reason people eventually come looking. The strategy works on the downside and taxes the upside. Turning down your need for other people doesn't only mute the fear of being let down, it mutes the rest of it. The relief of being known, the particular quiet of someone getting it without you having to explain. You end up with a life that functions well and feels slightly muffled, and from the inside it's hard to tell whether that's the world or you. So where do you actually start? Not with "be more vulnerable." That instruction is useless, and it's also mildly threatening. First, catch the exit. Don't cancel it. The next time someone asks something real and you feel the door start to close, you don't have to answer differently. Just notice the moment. Name it internally. That's the reflex, not a decision. You're separating the impulse from the identity, and that gap is where everything else becomes possible. Second, go 1 degree past the true answer. Once, not the whole story. If busy is what you'd normally say, try busy, and honestly a bit stretched. That's it, 1 degree. The point isn't disclosure, it's a small experiment that gives your nervous system evidence. I said a true thing, and nothing bad happened. Third, stay 4 seconds longer. When someone's upset, notice the pull to fix it or step out, and instead just remain 4 seconds past comfortable. You don't need words. Presence without a solution is a skill, and it's trainable. Fourth, watch for the retreat after the good thing. Get curious rather than compliant. When you feel the step backwards after a lovely weekend, treat it as information rather than instruction. Ask, is this a real need for space, or is this old? Sometimes it's genuinely space. Sometimes it's a 9-year-old checking the exits. And fifth, if you want the deeper version of this, a therapist who works with attachment can move much faster than self-study, partly because this pattern is very hard to see from inside. It's made of the things you don't do, and absences are invisible to the person living them. I can't tell you from here what your attachment style is, and I'm not going to tell you your relationships need changing. That's genuinely yours. But if you recognized yourself, I'd like you to leave with this. The self-sufficiency you built is real, and it is yours, and you don't have to dismantle it. Nobody is asking you to become a person who needs a great deal. The invitation is smaller than that. It's to find out whether the door has to stay closed now that you're the one holding it, and whether the person on the other side, the one who put their phone down and waited, might be safer than the room you learned to protect.